John Z. DeLorean was a suave, swashbuckling General Motors executive who dated young models and palled around with celebrities. What was John DeLorean like as your dad?
Not at all that way.
That didn't sound familiar.
That year, shoulder straps became mandatory in cars because he proved it wasn't cost ineffective to put them in cars. He then fought until the 80s, continuing to testify before Congress until airbags were standard in every car. Over 50,000 lives have been saved by John DeLorean risking his job and his livelihood to prove that the automotive industry was lying. I spent a long time, 46 years, outrunning my name, outliving my name. And now I get to own it and use it to change lives for people. And if you want to stop me because you want to do a hostile trademark registration takeover of my father's beloved brand, that's not a good look. That's just not a good look. Hi, I'm Kat DeLorean, and this is Cars and Culture with Jason Stein.
What a pleasure to have you on the program, Kat. You know, your father's legacy is obviously one that many know well, but they might not know your story that well, but we're going to share it today. And I know you're very proud to share your story, but let's start off with what exactly are you working on currently that is now up to date? I've seen some stories in Wired magazine, maybe today or yesterday, about you. But share a little bit about where the life of Ms. DeLorean is currently.
Thank you. Yes. So there was a really cool article, and I as a cybersecurity expert, that was kind of cool. I mean, my dad wanted time, but Wired, yes. So
You made it into Wired magazine.
I know, it's amazing. I love it. It's really is a moment for me. So why everybody's okay, why was I in Wired magazine? So we are working on the world's first not-for-profit. We're working on trying to go fully nonprofit, but right now it's a hybrid not-for-profit automotive company that will build supercars to fund education. And what's really cool about that is every aspect of the build also involves the students. So we have turned the build itself into its own apprenticeship program. And you asked for an update where we are. So anybody who kind of knows what's going on is like, okay, Kat, we've heard all that stuff already.
Right.
And the update is we are going to begin our summer build. I'll have more details about that in about a week or two. But when we start our fundraising effort, we'll allow people to come and sponsor a student to participate in our summer build. And we have all this really exciting information coming out very soon about how you can participate in that and how people can help make this dream a reality for the students. But the idea behind what we're doing, so it's called D&G Motors, and DeLorean Next Generation, for the record, is me. And yes. DeLorean Legacy Project is the sponsoring 501c3 organization for what's going on. So it's kind of a whole big, I guess people like to say, well, your dad made a bunch of companies. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. And just talk, for those who don't know, just talk about the students and talk about where.
Sure. Yes. So we are going to be working with students in Detroit, and where and why. So one of the things that, well, actually, let's go back to me. We'll talk a little bit about me.
Sure.
I have,
since I was talk about you.
Since I was in fourth grade, I've always wanted to be a teacher. People convinced me it wasn't a very lucrative career, so I kind of went into technology and still taught everybody. So I retired from my career in cybersecurity to focus on my mentorship. My husband and I were actually, we created the charity, and we were trying to create an automotive engineering program in one school in our little school district in New Hampshire. And when we started to try and build one car to film it for what goes into building a car, suddenly I ended up with a car company. And that's sort of how it all came together. But the reality is we saw an opportunity to take what we were doing and turn it into what we have, where we've built all of these partnerships with different people offering automotive education, different manufacturers, anybody who just thinks it's really cool and wants to be part of it. And the answer I get, everybody reaches out to me. They say, can I be part of what you're doing, or do you need any help? I say, sure. If you're willing to open up your programs and processes to my students and have a fully immersive experience, send an email to partnerships@dngmotors.com and we'll talk, because it's not about building the car. It's about what we can do to create these different opportunities for students to see what it means. Manufacturing is a cool job. It's not
Right.
bad. People don't know that. They don't know what's out there. Everybody's a maker. Hello, you can go do that for a living. Did you know that? So we really want to get people excited. Exposure. There's the old saying where they say, dream it, see it, be it. And I think it's out of order, because how can you dream it if you haven't seen it? So I believe that we need to expose kids to more pathways to passions, is what we call it. And I'm starting with automotive engineering, and we want to bring a fully immersive automotive engineering course to public high schools, not in a charter school, in the school where the kids get to participate in 3 tiers. You have engineering, design, engineering, and manufacturing, and they all work together. By the end of the year, they've all built a car. We sell the cars that we have. So we also have a supercar that is fully bespoke. And this whole program opens up access to our vendors and elite professionals for somebody who has enough money to want to build their own car. There aren't a whole lot of people who have opportunities like this, but people want it. Somebody just paid a whole lot of money to Cadillac to build a one-off. I believe it was
Right.
Cadillac, right? So,
Right.
so we want to make that available to people. And the only requirement is our portion of whatever happens goes to fund the education program and the public schools. So we found a way to take this really cool legacy and my father's dreams of creating opportunity for all, and accidentally turned this one-off car into this incredible vehicle, pun intended, to really create some lasting change for people for generations.
The one thing that you've insisted from the start is that you actually didn't want to start a car company.
I
Right?
tried not to.
It was a car company, after all, that had as wired rights that had ruined your father.
Yep.
But then something changed your mind. What happened in April of a couple of years, 2 years ago now?
Um, so sometimes you have to accept that the universe is trying to tell you something and it might know better than you, I suppose would be the best way to describe it. What literally happened was we were building this one-off and everybody was coming to us, and I had people who really wanted to support what we were doing at a very high and professional level. And I had exceptional partners in the automotive industry who just loved my dad, who were like, well, why not let us build the car? If you build the car, then you could pay for the program. And we talked about how it can open up all of these different opportunities. So I said, okay, let's do it, because that allows us to have something that then funds the program. So it was when I ended up having, I didn't have to seek it out. I suddenly realized I had it. Well, it's actually short-sighted and stubborn of me to say no if this is what's laid before me.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned the universe to some extent, and there was originally the kind of the connection, if you will, an Instagram connection from somebody who was in Spain. Tell that side of the story.
An angel with a car.
An angel with a car. Exactly.
Yes, yes, yes. This story is so wild that when I went back to get the receipts for Wired to show them like how the conversation went down, I was like, I thought I was embellishing my memories, but no.
Tell us that story again.
This is really fun. I had retired from my career to focus on mentorship. And one of the things I was also doing, the new person who hired me, I said, okay, I'm also going to be a DeLorean. I don't have a huge social media presence because of my cybersecurity job, but I'm going to go reach out to these people. We're going to start going again. He said, fine, because I I'm still in a cybersecurity job. They need to know I'm going to have a public presence. Don't hire me if you're going to have a problem with Instagram. So I'm trying to reach out to all of the fans and figure out how to tell their stories. Over the years, the DeLorean owners tell me these incredible stories about dreaming about the car as a child, buying the car as an adult, all of these different stories, and their whole lives have been either inspired, driven, or changed by owning this car. So I said, wow, this is something that people don't know. This is a whole lore to this car, to this story about my dad, that a lot of them, they become inspired because they read his story. And really what happened to him is a lot more fascinating than the one people tell him. He was severely set up by the government. Universal wouldn't have put the car in a children's movie if he actually had any indication of dealing drugs. This was a time when reputation mattered.
Yes.
So the car ended up in the movie because of my father's situation, not because the car was just cool and famous. It was a really big, big deal.
Right.
So, but I digress. I wanted to tell the positive story because that story has been twisted and told in all these different ways. And as I was doing it, I needed to figure out how to reach back out to all of these fans. Do I go on DMC Talk? Do I find people on Facebook? I need to know what's the best way to gather these stories. How do people know I'm here? How do people that haven't been following me for years on Instagram find me again? And so I'm reaching out to the people in the DeLorean community and figuring out what to do. And then I decide I want to register a website, DeLoreanLegacy.com, in order to house all of my father's accomplishments and stories, all this really cool stuff that I'm learning. And we go to register it, and it's taken, but there's nothing on it. So it looks like what's called parked in tech terms.
Right.
And I'm really upset because what happens with parked websites, for those who don't know, is somebody will buy a valuable website and then they will not use it so that they force you to buy it from them, or they hold on to it so that somebody else can't use it for something else. So I'm like, okay, who has this? Why do they have this? Who has the right to the legacy? That's literally me. That's literally me. So What do I do? I start texting one of my old friends in the DeLorean community, what's happening? He says, well, do you know about the new car? What are you talking about? Right? I don't know what you're talking about. He says, well, the new company is doing this thing. And so they're sending cease and desist to everyone with a DeLorean URL. And that's probably what happened. And I said, I had no idea what was happening. And I said, okay, we'll figure all this out later. You're going to tell me what's going on, but how do I get this URL? What do I do? As this conversation is happening, I get a message on LinkedIn from Angel, I'm trying to say his name properly, that tells me, oh, by the way, I registered this site and I wanted to put the car that I designed on it and talk about how much I love your dad. And I want to create a section in it where people can send letters to your father about how much he means to them.
He had doodled a dream car. He's an automotive designer, and it was a tribute, right?
Yes.
To his love of the DMC 12.
Yes, because he became an automotive designer because he saw the car in the movie at 6 years old and fell in love, and the story is the same one that everybody tells.
Everybody tells.
Yeah. So he created and the car, I got to watch him update the car. We'll get to the chassis. Let me finish the story and I'll tell you this amazing thing that happened when I watched how he honored the DNA of the DeLorean in his design. So I went back and I looked at my messages. This is where I actually see the conversation between myself, Angel, and another gentleman named Alan Portillo. And the conversation goes, I can't believe you had that website. And Alan says, I can't believe I registered it last night. Meaning he registered it at the exact time I was trying to get it, meaning it looked park because they actually put something up on it that night. And it all happened in this exact timing, which is wild. I mean, that's wild.
Yes.
But as I've learned, when you are doing what you're meant to do, you kind of get signs that it's the right thing to do. So this was the first one. I think the next one that came was when we realized that we toured factory locations the same exact day, a day later than my father had in his original business plan that we were working off of.
Wow.
He was going to tour them on October 22nd, which was a Sunday, and we toured them on October 23rd. So I was going to tell a fun story about Angel, but I let myself not digress, and now I forgot. So
So, where is Angel in the picture today?
Angel is still our designer. He's still working with us. He's actually one of the leads on the whole project. He was very, very excited about being able to work with us because he said he became an automotive engineer because he couldn't find a design school. And when
Hmm.
he or he thought he wanted to be an engineer, when he really wanted to go into design, he couldn't find somewhere to go. And then when he finally found it, it was really hard to afford. And our whole program comes with a support system for the students to be able to go where they want. I told my husband, I said, our mission statement is to change the world one person at a time. While we will have curriculum and events and offerings for many students, our goal is to focus on 10 to 15 a year that we put all our resources into to give the best opportunity for success. Because the idea is if I invest in these 15 people, maybe they invest in 15 more, and we exponentially create something by really, really, uh, I can help a lot of people a little bit, or 15 people change the world. We
Yeah.
want to create something that grows exponentially through inspiration, collaboration, and support. So,
Amazing. Let's talk a little bit about your dad, then we'll go back to the car. It was described in Wired so well. John Z. DeLorean was a suave, swashbuckling General Motors executive who dated young models and palled around with celebrities. What was John DeLorean like as your dad?
not at all that way.
That didn't sound
My
that didn't sound familiar.
He's a homebody, and he was definitely autistic. He didn't like loud noises, crowded places, or scratchy clothes. He wore jeans to Pontiac at a time when somebody actually got fired for wearing a brown suit and not a blue or a black one.
Hmm.
So he really, I think so the honest truth is, in my opinion, I can't say it's the honest truth. In my honest opinion is he was a dork his whole life, and he finally had a beautiful woman, to put it politely, and it got to his head.
Hmm.
And he behaved in ways that were uncharacteristic to him because he was and I think he kind of adopted it because it allowed him to exist in a world that didn't really fit who he was, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
He wasn't that bravado guy about all the people around him, and I think it was his way of feigning his confidence. I've learned through the past year, 2 years, and all of the research and things that I've done. I finally read his book. I was finally ready to read it at this time in my life. He felt like an imposter. And so I took this and I used this with my mentees and my students. And I say, if John DeLorean felt like he was an imposter when he was the vice president of the largest corporation in the world, what chance do any of us have? None.
Right.
So I believe that part of that whole flashiness, he just liked being something finally. And it really wasn't who he was, which is how he got so caught up in all of the hubbub. He was, this is my dad. So that's describing why I think he was that way then. We would go to dinner and I would get so upset because we could never go to dinner without him spending all the time we had together talking to the people who recognized who he was.
This is in Detroit.
No, this is in New York. This is in
Okay.
Los Angeles. This is
Oh,
anywhere we went.
wow.
I couldn't have time with my daddy. Sometimes on a particularly short night, they always came up to him with the same thing. Has anybody ever told you look like John DeLorean? He had one of a couple answers. If he had to go, thank you. I think he's a very handsome man. Or I get that all the time. Or that's because it's me. So these were his canned answers.
Wow.
And they were all based on how much time he had. So when he had time, he gave it all to whoever wanted to have it. And it wasn't to ignore me. He just was so gracious. You could show up at his door one time, somebody who I'm still in contact with, he lived in Bedminster. I've known him through the community for a long time. I actually met him at the New York Auto Show when I was 14. So I joke to people, I'm like, I've known him longer than all of you. But
Yeah.
he got the wrong pizza. And he called up the pizza place and he said, I have the wrong pizza. And he hears the guy yelling that the wrong pizza was delivered to Mr. DeLorean. He says, oh, did it go to Mr. DeLorean? Did I hear that right? And he's like, yeah. He says, don't worry about it. I'll go take care of it. So he hasn't really met my dad before, except for when he met him at the New York Auto Show, I think, or sold him a BMW. I don't know. But he goes to the door and he says, did you get the wrong pizza? My dad says, yeah. And he says, I think I got your pizza. And my father says, do you have anybody to eat it with? And he said, no. And he invited him inside and they sat and had dinner together. I think that's a very good way to quickly conceptualize the gentleman he was. If you showed up with his wrong pizza, he'd invite you in to
Right.
have some dinner and conversation. He was so kind that part of how I ended up with this car company was he had left 80 years on this planet of just kindness. Everything he did. The guy who fixed his bar stools told me a story about losing his lease, and my father tried to help him out. Somebody who pumped his gas. Every single person who he had ever interacted with started reaching out to me and saying, your father was so kind and gracious. Whatever you need, just let me know. And that's not the person that the rest of the world knows. That's not the person that's portrayed. That's not the Playboy model dating flamboyant guy everybody knows. And that's also part of why I sought to do the Legacy Project. There is a whole different person that is known by the people who are close to him than by the people who had more power and voice to tell his story.
Amazing. He was effectively, he launched the muscle car era.
Mm-hmm.
When you
Yeah.
took in the mid 1960s, a lot of people might not know this. They know Back to the Future, they know the DeLorean. But in the mid 60s, he wanted to put a bigger engine into an old lady car, and Pontiac became Pontiac.
That is, yes.
Yeah. And then left in 73 to do this. What are your memories? I know you were young. In fact, is it right? You were 6 when his high profile trial ended in an acquittal in the summer of 84.
Yes.
What are your memories? What are those early memories of him with DeLorean?
I don't have any of actually him when the car was being made. I have a lot of memories afterwards, and I've learned a lot of really cool stuff about
Tell me
that
that.
time.
Yeah.
So this I learned very recently, and this is one of the most fascinating, wonderful lost pieces of my father's history, and some of it is unknown until now because there's no way it could have been known. Let me explain. I met employee number 2. He said he was employee number 2 because my father already had employee number 1, which was his secretary. And this was for the John Z. DeLorean Corporation. So the John Z. DeLorean Corporation was officially started in 1973. But this guy says it's 72. Here's my phone book that I printed for him. It's 1972. This is what happened. At that time, I believe this is what happened based on the government documents I found by searching NHTSA and John DeLorean Corporation. This is what happened. The industry as a whole was presenting incorrect independent research about how much it costs to put passive restraints in cars. He, behind the back of the entire automotive industry, went and hired this guy and said, you're going to be my employee, but you have to be an independent contractor. By the way, I'm going to buy you an entire suite of print machines so that you can handle printing my reports. Why would anybody buy their own printers when they could have just gone to a professional printer and had it done. You do that when you don't want anybody to know what you're doing. In 1972, he began working with Allstate to create a study with the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration.
NHTSA. Right.
That was then used in a presentation before Congress that I am going to paraphrase, but almost quote, how do you explain the discrepancies between the Allstate National Highway Transportation Safety Administration report by the John Z. DeLorean Corporation and your independent research? That year, shoulder straps became mandatory in cars because he proved it wasn't cost ineffective to put them in cars. He then fought until the 80s, continuing to testify before Congress until airbags were standard in every car. Over 50,000 lives have been saved by John DeLorean risking his job and his livelihood to prove that the automotive industry was lying. Now, that is also how the car came to be, because Allstate wanted him to build a car that they could, a safety car that they could then sell at Sears. Well, my dad said, I don't want to build your car. I want to build my own car. And that's how that all started.
Oh, my goodness.
It's crazy. The whole story behind this whole thing. That gentleman also told me the Aerovet that he wanted to buy from General Motors, he had a personal garage in which he drove both the Reynolds Corvette prototype car and the Aerovet prototype car to work every day. I don't know how he drove both cars. I asked him that question. He's like, he just drove both cars. But this is really, really cool history lost to time that people don't know. He had such an impact. The story of the GTO, going back to what you said, the story goes, he asked Bill, can you put this bigger engine in this car? Nobody said why. It wasn't to build an option model. That was his personal driver for a while before he realized nobody wanted to return it when he lent it to them. And he said, hey, why don't we produce this? Now, think about how much cooler the story of the GTO is when you think about the fact that it was just John DeLorean's personal hot rod that he had the power to turn into a production car.
Yeah. Incredible.
It's amazing.
He's
amazing. Such a cool guy.
Yeah. And he's a cool guy to write a letter thanking the director and screenwriter of Back to the Future, saying how honored he was to have the DeLorean in Back to the Future. In fact, said that it had all but immortalized his car, despite all the failings, despite high inflation, despite the fact that it didn't work. Back to the Future, I know you don't really remember the first time that you saw it, but the lasting impact, I mean, you must run into people all over the place. What is it about this car that continues to capture the imagination of everyone?
Well, look at it. If you look at it amongst the cars today, so put any car from the 80s up against a modern car today, and it doesn't fit. It very much doesn't stand out, the boxy look and all this stuff. The N74, for everybody listening, is actually based off a Hyundai that Giugiaro designed. It looks like that Hyundai, but it also looks like a DeLorean, and it's a modern car, and it fits. That car is literally timeless. Literally timeless. It can fit anywhere. It also is so unique and different. And at the time, a lot of the people, they learned about the car, then they learned about his story, which is all but buried now. You actually have to do a Google search and restrict your searches to before 2005, before he died, when he could no longer sue people for defamation, and you find the truth. But when you start to read his story, part of what really drew the original owners and the whole community to him was first learning about the car and then what happened to him. I mean, one of the agents actually quit working for the government. He was so disgusted over what happened. This was a wild story. Now people are comparing him to OJ. No, he wasn't acquitted because the glove didn't fit. He was acquitted because the government set him up and he wouldn't have been there in the first place at all. So it was such a wild, sensational story. Anybody who learned about it was like, holy cow, he dared to dream and they took him down. This is the most badass car on the planet. So there was this legend and lore to it. Then the adults showed their kids Back to the Future, and now nostalgia has taken over, and everybody is excited to share just the joy because of the movie and because of the rarity. There's a smile in every DeLorean every time it's seen, no matter who it is.
Still is. I've seen it on the field at various concours around the United States, at Amelia Island, at Pebble Beach, and various places. And it still draws the same oohs and ahs that it did back when it first came out. A few years ago, when it was the 40th anniversary of the DMC 12, his name kept coming up again. And as you say, nostalgia and the documentaries and the movies and things like that. You weren't very happy, were you? Because some of these portrayals weren't fair.
They're not. So Tamir and I made this movie forever. We made this movie forever, and he wanted to tell the story he knew. It's called Framing John DeLorean because the movie he made was not the movie he was making. It
Right.
was about my dad being framed. Unfortunately, I introduced him to Christina, and Christina has her own motives for what she does. And so I was very upset because my doctor told me that the therapy I had to be in for my life that she blamed on my father was actually due to the fact that her behavior is indicative of malignant narcissism. So when talking to one of my siblings, I said, don't listen to her when she says that to
This
you.
is your mother we're talking
She's
about.
a malignant narcissist.
Right.
And then her retaliation to that was to go onto Netflix and call my father a malignant narcissist. So he wasn't. You know how I know? I didn't know about all of the. First of all, he didn't do evil things to me for his own happiness. But more than that, he never told me about the parts where he changed the world. We talked about little things. I didn't know about the seatbelts and the airbags until I found it on my own. He never talked about his grandiose accomplishments. He did things. He worked on the lunar lander. I didn't know that. That's crazy. That's so cool.
Yeah.
A narcissist has to make sure you know all that stuff. So it's unfortunate. And this goes back to, I tell people, so my father and I lived a very similar life, and I have ethics that are really strange. They are very black and white. I think it has to do with my autism, but they're very stringent lines I will not cross. And that makes me somebody that my leaders could trust, and that I, have developed a very good reputation for myself. But sometimes you come across somebody who can't throw you under the bus because how? And that gets them very angry. And then they retaliate against you, and then they try and say terrible things about you. Now, the thing about when my dad was alive, social media and the internet didn't exist. The people who had more power to speak about you loudly could. And there wasn't a whole lot you could do about it without a PR agent, all of these other things. Today, you can tell your truth. Today, I can post on Instagram, hey, whatever all you're doing with the trademark, could you please stop lying about it and then tell my truth, right? Before, I would have had to get wired to pick it up before anybody even noticed. And that was what he was up against. He actually got in a fight with Keith Crane, I believe, according to his book. And Keith Crane owns an entire publishing corporation. And then somebody told me a story. They said, oh, there's this article I read about what a flamboyant, high-flying playboy he was, and he did this, 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 and this. And I said, was that by any chance published in a Crane Communications publication? And he said, yes, how did you know? So the point is, now I don't know what's going on with that, right? I don't know what's going on. But when I could say, I know where that kind of story came from, it's indicative of the fact that he angered some people for whatever reason, and they were able to spread stories that were maybe not untrue, but characterized in a way that makes it seem like when you say I'm doing something illegal, you mean I'm breaking the rules, but you want me to sound like a criminal.
Hmm. What's
And I'm not breaking the rules,
yeah.
for the record.
Explain to me the cease and desist that you received about using the name.
Uh so it wasn't sent to me, to the car company. D&G Motors and DeLorean Legacy Project both existed. They sent a cease and desist to the DeLorean Legacy Project to
Who is
stop
they, Kat?
the DeLorean Reimagined and
Right.
DeLorean Motor Company Texas. They sent a cease and desist to the DeLorean Legacy Project telling me to stop using hashtag DeLorean because it was clearly so that I would link myself to their brand. My lawyer responded and said, you're suing a charity, not the car company. And their response was, well, sue the car company when the car company exists. The car company existed. And see, that in there is the problem. They can't do anything about the fact that I would like to establish myself as my own person. I called the company D&G Motors on purpose. DeLorean Next Generation is my consulting company that I started outside of all of this. D&G stands for me. I am the next generation of DeLorean. D&G Motors, not DeLorean. JZD, not DeLorean. You can't sue me for calling my car a DeLorean because people call it a DeLorean because I am a DeLorean.
You are the DeLorean.
You can't make me not be a DeLorean. So it's important. It was like, I know in the Wired article, she said it was because of the car. They literally sent a cease and desist to a charity nonprofit starting an education program telling me I had to stop using hashtag DeLorean. So, but here's the thing about this. I've spoken to many attorneys and they've all told me that they can't stop me no matter what, because they can't stop me from using my name, no matter who owns my father's IP, which I still very much believe is mine for many reasons that I can't talk about on the radio because that belongs to my attorney. But regardless of that, what I'm doing has nothing to do with any of that, and it can't be stopped. Any trademark law even says anybody who wants to license by Cat DeLorean or DeLorean Next Generation, I can do it. You can't stop me from using my last name. So all I've done is focused on what I'm doing. And I pay my attorneys to worry about them while we figure out all this stuff that's going on. And now I have a summer build where I get to focus on the kids because I spent a long time, 46 years, outrunning my name, outliving my name. And now I get to own it and use it to change lives for people. And if you want to stop me because you want to do a hostile trademark registration takeover of my father's beloved brand, that's not a good look. That's just not a good look.
Where does that sit right now?
I'm working on how I'm going to start my fundraising efforts next week so I can take care of my kids. You'd have to ask my attorney that question.
Got it. Yeah.
It's literally, I don't want to say the furthest thing from my mind, but I say this a lot. In this world, you can make up for a lot of things. You can make up for bad issues that cause broken relationships. You can make more money. You can buy a new house. You can rebuild your house. You can replace your stuff. You can't get back your time, even if you are a DeLorean, let alone owning one. So time is the most valuable resource you have. If I give anybody unrented space in my head when I have something before me that will allow me to change the world for a lot of people, I'm focused on the wrong thing. I'm focused on the name on the back of a car like my father was. And instead, when Brexit was up on the table, they interviewed a Northern Irishman who said, I fear the factories will leave. They are what ended the Troubles. And I lost it. I started hysterical crying. And my husband looks at me and goes, do you need chocolate? I said, no, Jason. He just said my father was right. He just said my father did what ended the Troubles, and that's what my father was trying to do. And this is why the day I realized my father what the car meant to him, I fell to my knees, overwhelmed with looking at that car. The day we crossed a line where we were now going to be successful, no matter what happened, whether we built a car or whatever, the education portion would be successful because we stepped back and said, it's not about the car, it's about what we're doing. I looked at the car and I went, oh my God, Jason, he saved Ireland and he lost it because he was worried about his name on the back of a car. That car is a representation of his ego getting ahead of his mission. He hated that car. Now, it also wasn't a representation of his engineering prowess, right? Because he had to make all of these. He had to make all of these concessions on what went into the car so he could build the factory, because it was about helping people, about factories. Even Bill Haddad said he wanted to put his factories where they would do the most social good. For anybody who doesn't know, Bill Haddad was his finance partner, and they did not have a good ending. This was when they were publicly fighting. He said, I followed him because he didn't just throw money at his Christian beliefs. He put his money where his beliefs were. He stood by them. And he wanted to put his factories where they would do the most good. Could you imagine if he succeeded? Yes, I can, because that's what I'm doing. I'm going to rebuild Gary, Indiana. Why? Because I did The Music Man twice in high school. That's what I blame it on. I hope a couple of theater geeks are laughing at the Gary, Indiana song reference right there. But the point is,
Michael Jackson.
we have this opportunity to actually do something meaningful and impactful and help rebuild American infrastructure. We literally have an opportunity to bring America back to the time in the 60s in the automotive heyday when the GTO was the coolest thing on the block. So that's what I'm focused on. Not a name on a car, not a name on a brand. I don't need the DeLorean name on a brand to get all of the help and support and attention I'm getting. Why? Because DeLorean's my dad, not a car.
Right. Couple final things, Kat. There was the talk of unveiling the prototype of the JZD on your father's 100th birthday in 2025. Is that still the goal?
That's still our goal. Caveat emptor. When we were pushing to meet this goal, we wanted to have a rolling chassis this summer, or this winter, this fall, maybe winter, and we were going to do the summer build to actually get a rolling chassis. And our low production, our low volume, that doesn't even matter. Our manufacturer said, okay, but we only have a 1/5 model. We need a full size. Let me figure out how to get that done so we can start the build. I said, wait a minute. Are you going to do a step without the kids and then rush that step so we can work on the next step with the kids? And he said, yes. I said, no, you're not. You're going to go back and you're going to spend this summer doing that step, which may put us behind on the full prototype release. I don't think it will. We found a way to address this. But the reason why I say this is if I come across a situation that requires me to delay my unveiling because it means the kids get their opportunity, I'm going to take it 100% of the time. So while I plan, and I still plan to release it on my father's 100th birthday, and I will have something, I'm going to say if I don't show up with a full prototype, it's because it's about the kids, not the car.
Right, exactly. You haven't said the name of the school. You should probably give that a plug.
Oh, I have a couple of things I'd like to plug, if that's okay with you.
Of course.
I actually just started a podcast. It's called Poor Little Rich Girl. And it's only on Spotify right now. We're going to be uploading it, but it is the story behind all of this. So I will tell you a story about my life of growing up or something, and then I'll interview somebody who gives context to the story. The first story is An Angel with a Car, talks about how I met Angel, and now I'm trying to set up my audio correctly. I had to undo it, so I made sure you had good audio so I could do a podcast because that's special. So if you could please try and find me on Spotify now, we're working on getting it onto all the platforms. And then please pay attention to DeLorean Next Generation on D&G Motors on Instagram, on Facebook, and our website, DeLoreanNextGen.com, because starting next week, we're going to start our fundraising for our students, and everybody will have a chance to find out how they can participate, support our students, and hear more about our summer build. The schools, we're going to be working with is it Drive One Academy, or is it just Drive One? It's Drive One in Detroit. They're the ones who worked with us on our 1/5 scale model. We're also asking a couple of where we reached out to Cass Tech to see if they have a couple of students, my father's high school, that can also participate with the Drive One students. So, and the build will be happening at, I can't say this correct, Violectra. Is that how you say it? Violectra, who is our manufacturing partner, who is just super excited to actually, he was very excited that I stopped the build and said, you have to spend all the time with the kids. And he built a really cool curriculum for them to go through. So those are all of the people who are helping. Did I forget anybody? No. Okay. I didn't forget anybody.
I love it. Your story is inspirational. It's fascinating. It is mind-blowing to some extent. We wish you the best of luck. You are creating car culture. You are cultivating it. We thank you for being a guest on Cars and Culture, Kat.
Thank you for having me. Have a wonderful
Thank you.
day.